Hey, it's Eve. Welcome back to class with Prof. Eve. In this video, we are going to have a academic materials lab where we review resumes and CVs. CVs are curriculum vitas, and those are used specifically for academic jobs. And so if you're applying to become a teacher, a adjunct professor, get a full-time professor job, then you would want to develop a CV. There's similar content in resumes and CVs, but the style is different, and there are some differences in content that we'll be able to discuss as we go through these samples. Now, what I'm going to do for this lab is I'm just going to pull some resumes and CVs offline and just go through them individually, give my own, feedback about how they can be improved or some of the areas of weakness that exists on them. And hopefully that will help you to kind of polish up and refine your own resumes or CVs. Another thing that I'll kind of talk about in the context of this discussion is the way that I discuss this in my sociology classes. Now, while we don't spend a lot of time talking about resumes and CVs, these are students who are hoping to find work at some point or who are working, who do have to actively develop resumes. So that's a very normal and common thing that students actually need to learn to develop and refine while they're in college. So, in the context of sociology, resumes come up when we're talking about cultural capital. And so, in sociology, cultural capital, this is actually a term that was borrowed from, I believe, Pierre Bourdieu, the French, uh, the French scholar. I believe it's Pierre Bourdieu. I don't think it's Michel Foucault. I think Pierre Bourdieu is the one that developed cultural capital. And so, there are three aspects of cultural capital: embodied capital, objectified capital, and institutional capital. And so with embodied capital, and let me just before I get into the descriptions of that, let me just talk about what capital is. So capital is resources. We can also think about it in the form of just plain outright money or funds, right? If you think about capital in the context of like US society, capitalism is the generation of like profit funds. And so capital in general can refer to money, or it can just refer to resources. So when we're talking about cultural capital, we're not necessarily talking about monetary capital, but we're talking about other important resources to have that are of value in the society in which you live. So embodied cultural capital is the type of capital that you have in your person. So it includes your personality, your conversation style, the way you interact with others, those sorts of things that make you uniquely you. Objectified capital are the symbolic aspects of your life that you can, kind of discuss or offer to the world. So this can show up as, assets that you have, things of value that you have. So even like your cell phone, your computer, your home are examples of objectified capital. But also in the context of resumes, that could be experience as well. And so we'll come to that because there can be some overlap between objectified and institutional capital, which is the last type of capital. And that specifically deals with credentials, skills, certification, and those kind of technical qualifications that you have. All right. So I'll go through those different types of capital as we're looking at the resumes and CVs. So first we'll look at a sample resume. And like I said, I'm just pulling these directly offline. Okay, I think I want to use a different one than I had there. Okay. So give me just a moment. I want to get the right ones here. Okay. So these are sample resumes. Close this. So let's just pull one. Let's see. Jane Smith. So let's see what Jane Smith has here. Hopefully you all can see this. I don't know if there's a way to make it larger. Hmm. Okay, so this is as big as it's going to get. Okay. So first, we can just kind of do an overview of the layout of the resume. This is a pretty basic standard design. And maybe we could actually start there with the design and formatting. In our contemporary society, we have all of these resources available to us. Some are free, some are paid, but nonetheless, they are resources that did not once, exist. So I would encourage you to explore the AI tools that are available, whether it's Chat GTP or Claude, to help you to format and design your resume. Because although this is a functional resume, it's very standard and basic, right? There's not much here that like draws your attention. It's not super attractive. I like the way the name stands out in the text, but it's just not that your resume needs to be, super designed and have all these things going on. You don't want to distract from your content, but you could improve the design and format of this resume, I would say. So I would use an AI tool to give you some suggestions on format and design. There are certain tools that you could use that will design the whole document in itself. Gamma is one of those options, GAMMA. And there is a paid and free version of Gamma that you can use where you write up your content and then it develops the document. And usually it's really nicely formatted. You have lots of different options in the format choices. So that would be the first thing that I would say as we're going through this is pay some attention to your design and format. Try to enhance that. Try to make it attractive. What's going to be the first thing that they see before they even get into reading the text? What are going to be some things that draw their attention that make them want to continue looking through your entire resume? Because I imagine some employers, kind of skip over certain sections, just look for certain things. So you want them to really read through your resume and make it appealing enough for them to want to do that. Okay, so let's get into the content here. So we have our basic information of your contact name obviously should be there, and I do like the way that this one is highlighted. The name is pronounced and draws your attention right away. I would change maybe the titles here, and again, an AI tool could help you come up with some creative headings because this is just kind of dull, right? I mean, it gets the job done, and if the content of your resume is good enough, it's not going to stop you from getting a job probably. But just for, there's a lot of stimulation in our world, a lot of things going on. You want to have appealing, attractive content, to offer people. So I would adjust these titles. I would not just call this education and experience. I would find some more interesting headings and titles for each one of these categories. So in education, they have college number one. So this is one that's just telling you what to put in here. College number two, and then the location and year you attended. So that is kind of the standard, format that you would use. Um, Again, I think that this could be worded differently. Um, if you had a different, title here, for your my learning journey or something, that don't use that. Use something more crafty. But if this instead of education, it says my learning journey. I guess that could work. And then you list the institutions that you've attended. Okay, so I guess that's okay. I'm trying to think of a different way that you might want to list that. I guess for this section, that's okay. This is your institutional capital where you're just kind of listing your qualifications and credentials. So I think that's okay. Listing your degree and major, location and years attended. Okay, fine. So aside from changing the heading, I think for the part where you're just focused on the institutional credit, establishing the credibility, I think that's fine to leave that pretty basic. So let's move on to experience. We're going to add a more attractive heading instead of experience. So we have work experience number one, work experience number two, and then the month and year. This is an area of the resume that you can really play around with and develop to make it uniquely yours and stand out from the rest. And so when you're talking about your work experience, make it a story, make it a movie. Take them through your work experience. Don't just say, for 2 years I worked at this place, I was a typesetter. What does this say? Lauren Ipsum and Sipley, dummy text of the printing and typesetting industry. It's a long established fact that a reader will be distracted by the readable. Okay, so this is just some dummy text here for the sample resume. But again, when you're talking about your work experience, make it attractive. Have people visualize what that was like, what your workplace looked like, and what you did, how you helped people. What was your role in contributing to that workplace? So try to be elaborate when you're discussing your work experience. Again, you only have so much room and you don't want to have fluff, a lot of unnecessary text. But if you're given the opportunity to talk about your work experience, then make it flavorful, right? Because in most cases, it is pretty dynamic, what you did. And of course, you're centering yourself here. So you are showing the importance of the work that you did, how you contributed, the impact that you had on other people. So really take them through that process when you're describing your work experience. And this is giving them a little bit of your embodied capital, right? Your embodied cultural capital. It's telling them a little bit about how you work with other people, what kind of problems you solve, how you can contribute to their workplace as well. So do spend some time kind of working through that because there's not, a lot of areas where you get to sort of really, describe in the way that you want, on a resume besides this particular section. What's the next one here? Projects. And so we're going to call that one something different. And I would create some really interesting names for each one of these projects as well. If it was a workshop on, like I gave a teaching workshop, call that something much, different. And again, take people through that process of what the workshop involved, what you offered, what you actually did, and what the result was. So really get into the details of that, not just I led this workshop, 50 people attended. What did you do? What resources did you use? What did you teach? How did you help people? What was the outcome, the expected intended results of that workshop? Okay. And then the last section is just looking at skills. So this is another one like the top that is more of the institutional cultural capital, where there's not really a whole lot that you can do besides modify some of the design aspects of it. And so they kind of laid this section out differently from the others. They have kind of the blocks that show different skills that they have proficiency in. And in some resumes, people do list, Python intermediate level or Microsoft Office advanced. You may want to specifically state where you are as far as your expertise in those particular skills. Okay. And so that might be something that's attractive. And it also gives you a chance to list multiple skills. You don't have to list only skills that you've perfected and that you're an expert in. You can also list the skills that you have some intermediate experience in because you might be hired for one thing, but there may be something else that you could also contribute to in that workplace. Okay. So this is going to take us to another resume. This looks like a cover letter. Let's see if we can find another resume option. Maybe I'll close this one and pull up a different one. We'll look at one more resume and then we will look at a CV after that. Okay. So let me pull up another resume option. Let's see here. I want to find one that actually has, that's not kind of sample that's telling you what to put in those sections, but one that actually has the content in there. I think this is one. Okay. So we'll use this example. Okay. I don't remember where the person was, but we'll just click on one of these. There are, especially for online resume submissions, people are adding photos to their resumes and, all sorts of things that, in the past we didn't have the opportunity to do that sort of thing. But now with the digital option, you can add, your photo to the resume. You can do all of these different things. Okay, sorry, I'm struggling to find the one that I wanted here. Let's see, is this one going to open for me? Sorry. We're almost there. So close, so close, so close. Yeah, a lot of people are designing resumes in Canva. So that's another option for you as far as the design formatting aspect of things. Okay. I want to just make this big enough so that you can see it. That's kind of what I'm struggling with right now. I don't know if I'll be able to make this one bigger. Uh, maybe with this one, I don't think I'll use that. Sorry, I'm trying to find one that will provide a really good example for us to work through that will open and be clear, somewhat clear to read would be great. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's see. This one gonna work? Okay, we're just gonna go with this one because I've spent enough time trying to find the perfect resume, and that goes against what I'm trying to do in this video. I'm not trying to find the perfect resume. I just need to find one. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, so I'll kind of go through this. This has some actual information, not just the kind of fillers like the last one. Okay, so again, we have our basic information that you need to have at the top of any of your documents, resumes or CVs. And then we have professional summary, so you can see sort of the changes in language instead of education, experience. We have professional summary, skills, work history. So in the professional summary, versatile, hardworking customer service representative with more than 10 years experience in the retail industry, enjoys intrinsic rewards of helping others and establishing rapport with clients and customers, skilled at ensuring repeat patronage and customer loyalty by providing exemplary service, responding to customers' needs and questions, and resolving disputes, available immediately for full-time employment. So pretty good introductory summary. I think that I would start with saying something about myself. I would start with the embodied capital, which I guess they are mentioning that with versatile and hardworking. But I wouldn't start the first sentence with versatile. Like I would actually make the first sentence an actual sentence. Like, my name is John Doe, John D. Doe, and I am a hardworking career service representative, dot, 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 dot. I would start this differently. I don't like that it starts with versatile, hardworking customer. Like it's listing bullet points. If you're going to have a summary, then make that in full and complete sentences, not bullet points. You have the opportunity for bullet points in these other areas, like the skills areas mentioned has the bullet points. That's where you do bullet points. This is actually something that I talk to my students about a lot is knowing when to use bullet points and knowing when you need to elaborate. And so if you're doing a summary, it needs to be full and complete sentences. And that is definitely something I would change there. But aside from that, you are getting the embodied capital. You are getting aspects of the person's character and their contributions to the workplaces that they've been a part of. So that does come through. So I would just start out the paragraph a little bit differently and just all around actually make these full and complete sentences. Maybe insert some I's in here and I'ms in here. I wouldn't end it with available immediately. I am available immediately for full-time employment, that sort of thing. In the skills area, this is again a good place for you to put bullet points because you can list all of your relevant skills that you are applying or that are related to the job that you're applying for. You could have different categories of skills. Again, you could also indicate the different levels of expertise that you have in those different skill areas. You could even have skill categories, as well. So this section could be developed a lot more if you wanted to do that. Work history, customer service team member, cashier, Whole Foods, and then we have some bullet points. Responded to company needs by remaining flexible and fulfilling varying job roles, shifts as needed. Okay, so they're talking about what they did on at this particular job. So that's one way to do this. And they listed three different positions and the things that they did. I actually like that. And so some people have a really long work history and they're like way too many things that you could list and you don't want to list everything. You can't list everything. You don't want your resume to be multiple pages long. But I do like this idea, maybe highlighting two or three of the most relevant jobs that you've had, jobs that are relevant to the one that you're applying for. And then listing what your position was and the particular duties that you carried out. I really like that format. I haven't seen that very often in resumes. I like that. So aside from maybe changing the title, work history, making that a little bit more interesting, I actually do like this format because you get to see, okay, this is where the person worked, but this is specifically what they did. That's great. That's actually something I think I might I might incorporate into my CV. All right, and then at the end they mentioned education and this is something that was mentioned at the very top of the previous resume. And so again, these can be organized differently depending on the job that you're applying for. For this particular job, if it wasn't, if I was applying for an educational institution to be an adjunct professor or something, I would list my education at the top and then maybe the professional summary. But if you're applying for a different type of job, maybe the professional summary at the top or work experience history at the top might be a better place to put that. Okay? All right, terrific. Now we are going to, how y'all doing? You still with me? I know we've had some struggles trying to find some good samples because I wanted this to be organic. I didn't want to have everything ready to go. I wanted to just kind of pull a random thing and just kind of go through it. Okay. So I want to transition to CVs now. And so I'll share my screen again. So these are the curriculum vitae. These are the resumes for academic positions. Okay. So maybe we can look at this one. Now it's in Canvas, so I don't know if it's going to open. We'll see. I don't think I'm going to bother with those that are a little complicated. Give us a CV without any trouble, without all the fluff. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. Okay, terrific. All right, so let's discuss this. We have a lot of interesting things going on here. Let's get out of there. Okay. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. Can I just see the CV? Okay, so we'll do what we can here. I've never had this much trouble trying to find I use these all the time for class, and I don't think I've ever had as much trouble pulling one up with all of this ruckamaroo. Like, what is this? What is happening? But again, as I'm going through these, I'm really liking the ones that are offering the photo for digital resumes or CVs. I think that you should definitely do that. That is quite appealing. Okay, so we're gonna just work with this one here, even though this is a template, but this is a very common style. So you have your name, the contact information. They started with a personal summary. I do like this for the CV, starting with the summary, because CVs can be pretty long. Resumes are generally 1 to 2 pages. CVs can be 7, 10 pages. They can really be extensive. Again, I wouldn't necessarily want to have like a 12-page CV. But it's okay for CVs to be a little bit longer. It's expected that they would be a little bit longer if you're applying for an academic job. Then you probably have quite a bit of uh, work experience or educational experience that you need to list in there. So having a summary that kind of hits at some of those points that are found in later pages of the CV is a really good idea. Again, change the title to something a little more interesting, and make the format, appealing. But starting off with that summary, I think is a good idea for a CV. And then you have your career or work history. And so they said teacher, start date, employer name, and then they list the duties. And again, I think that this is something that should be a part of every resume and every CV, actually showing what you did. In mine, I list the classes that I taught, but I don't really get into a lot of details about the specific things that I do with my students and the different ways that I serve my students. I don't mention the fact that not only am I teaching students, I'm also advising and mentoring students. Those are things that would probably be helpful for me to add to my own CV. So I do like, mentioning the position and also listing the duties that you carried out. Okay. Key skills and competencies. These things are essential for your CV, right? You want to exemplify the different types of competencies that you have. So yes, you are applying for an academic job, but again, there's other things that are going to be required as a part of that job. I'm teaching. I'm also expected to advise and mentor a little bit. I help students with writing their papers, right? I help them with research, editing, like there's all sorts of different things. I do some counseling, you know what I'm saying? Not formally, but those are just things that kind of come up in the job. And I like the way that they have the separation between professional and personal competencies. This is really good, actually, adding the personal competencies, that embodied capital. That's making that personal connection of who you are as a person, what it's like to work with you and be around you. Warm personality who can quickly make people feel at ease, exceptional interpersonal and presentation skills. I like that a lot. And I think I mentioned this in one of the resume samples as well, to separate your skills and competencies into different category areas. And then you could also add the levels of expertise that you have. Okay. And then they list specific areas of expertise. That's also nice, right? And you could add more information here. Homework. What about homework? Help students with study habits. What about classwork? I would add a sentence or two here. Not a whole lot of text, but I would add some additional text, kind of explaining what you provide in these different areas specifically. And then we have our academic qualifications, which I would move up in this resume. This is a CV, so this is an academic resume. So I would move the academic credentials up here, like even either after the summary, or definitely after the career history. It should be further at the top, not at the bottom for a CV. Okay. And you don't want to add a lot of fluff in this area. For those institutional capital areas, those technical areas, don't add a whole lot of fluff. Besides making a catchy, nice title or heading, listing, what the school was, years attended is good enough. You don't want to add a whole lot more to those sections for those technical aspects. In these other sections is where you can add more flavor and personality and where you should. And then with CVs, you have the references option. And usually people write references upon request. You could do that a little bit differently and actually put references there. List friend reference, professional reference. Just list it right there in the CV. I think would be a good idea actually. Just have, two or three references right there in there where they don't have to request the references. This is the traditional way of doing this, but I'm giving you another idea that I think would be more appealing for modern CVs. Okay, so this looks very similar. All right, so I think that is actually about all that I want to cover in this lab for today. This was a good practice for me as I'm preparing for the next one. I'll know I might actually get some things pulled up so that we don't have to go through this, like them trying to get us to subscribe to Canva and download this and check it, like all that junk. Save us a little bit of time. But I do hope that you got some value from this laboratory and hopefully it gave you some ideas about how you can improve, update, and edit your resumes and CVs. As I was saying in the video, there's some things I'm going to go and change on my CV right now just from this discussion. I think there's some things that I can improve. So I will see you in the next lab or the next video. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll